Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Together. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Nashtapraeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Antashloke Bhakti Bhakti Nashiki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very needs of Pandavas, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, as well as Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By rendering the service of pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of the Godhead, who is great for transcendental songs, is established as a pure life. Krishna, good morning. It's nice to be back. Today we're going to be finishing this chapter called The Pandavas Retire Timely. And actually it's very significant. This last few verses is because this is in one sense the end of the Mahabharata, which is the greatest epic of all time and is coming to a close. And the way it ends is very interesting and there's so much to learn from it. So we're going to cover text 44 of chapter 15 to text number, well, the end, which is text 51. And we'll just go through the translations and then we'll come back to text 45 and dive into that verse. So anyone would like to begin? He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went.
The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhisthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother.
They all had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of the Lord Sri Krishna are the supreme goal of all. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption.
Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attained the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayana, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord Shri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in material conception of life, but the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attain that abode in their very same bodies.
Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhas. Because he was absorbed in thought of Krishna, he was received by the Dinsians of Pitraloka planet, where he returned to his original place.
Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands.
The subject of departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life.
Text 45. Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Pratara Krita Nischaya.
Pratara Krita Nishchaya.
Pratara Krita Nischaya.
Pratara Krita Nishchaya.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Dritva Sprita Prajabhuvi.
Vishwasrishna Prajabhuvi.
Drishtva Sprita Prajabhuvi.
Vishwasrishna Prajabhuvi.
Let's chant.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur. Pratara Krita Nishchaya. Kalina Dharma Mitrena. Vishwasrishna Prajabhuvi. Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur. Pratara Krita Nishchaya. Kalina Dharma Mitrena. Vishwasrishna Prajabhuvi.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Pratara Krita Nishchaya.
Pratara Krita Nishchaya.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Vishwasrishta Prajabhuvi.
Vishwasrishna Prajabhuvi.
Let's do the synonyms together. Sarve, all his younger brothers. Tam, him. Anunir Jagmur, left home by following the elder. Bratara, brothers. Krita Nischaya, decidedly. Kalina, by the age of Kali. Adharma, principle of irreligion. Mitrena, by the friend. Drishtva, observing. Sprishta, having overtaken. Praja, all citizens. Bhuvi, on the earth. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. Someone like to read the purport.
Younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir were already obedient followers of the great emperor, and they had sufficiently been trained to know the ultimate goal of life. They therefore decidedly followed their eldest brother in rendering devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna. According to the principles of Sanatana Dharma, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished and must engage himself in self-realization. But the question of engaging oneself is not always decided. Sometimes retired men are bewildered about how to engage themselves for the last days of life. Here is a decision by authorities like the Pandavas. All of them engaged themselves in favorably culturing the devotional service of the Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Swami Sridhar, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, or fruit of activities, philosophical speculations, and salvation, as conceived by several persons, are not the ultimate goal of life. They are more or less practiced by persons who have no information of the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is already indicated by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 18:64, and the Pandavas were intelligent enough to follow it without hesitation.
Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Vena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvisesha Shinyavari Paschita Deshidari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Panchakalpa Tribhuscha, Kripa Sindhu Devicha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So you see, something that I really found so interesting here is how the Pandavas took seize of the moment. They took advantage of the opportunity. Anybody familiar with this, I guess, Iskanism, Kali Yuga Katha? Space Kali Yuga Katha, and devotees engage in Kali Yuga Katha. It means if you ever see someone write on Facebook and they're like posting, this is happening in politics, this, and, universe that, and so many problems, and then someone goes, it's just going to get worse, Prabhu. It's only Kali Yuga. We're only 5,000 years in, and the person's like, oh my God, this is everything's going to hell. What's going on? It's this like negative Nancy kind of point of view to life that Kali Yuga is only progressing, it's only getting worse, which is true. It's in the Bhagavatam, it's correct. And then you just think, it's just getting worse. What are we going to do? And then you just kind of in this tumbleweed where it gets worse, and then you go, oh my God, it's getting worse, and it gets worse. You go, oh my God, it's getting worse. That's something I always really didn't like growing up. I was like, why are we so pessimistic to the world and how things are going? Just because we know things aren't getting better from one point of view. But this gives me a lot of hope because it shows that the Pandavas aren't pessimistic, they're opportunistic. They take seize of the opportunity ahead of them. And they see the situation, and they clearly see the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and the citizens of the kingdom were already affected. And they see it through the eyes of a king, so they can see really, it's like standing on top of a building and seeing everything that's going on. You can see how the age of Kali has really affected the people of this world, especially now that Krishna has left. So what do? They decide to follow in the footsteps of their brother, or follow in the footsteps of acharyas, great souls ahead of them. And that's, well, it's time to move on. It's time to focus on our one primary goal, our goal, which is going back to Godhead. Now, there's a really nice pastime, actually, that is directly connected to this part, this verse, which is the younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir, or the Pandavas, observe the age of Kali. And there's a pastime in which Krishna shows them the age of Kali. I don't know if anyone's heard this. It's from the Mahabharata, or maybe one of the Puranas that describe kind of details of the Mahabharata. And thank you. I wanted to share this story because it's really, really nice. And there's a lot of wonderful points in it, and it grabs the essence of what Kali Yuga is for a devotee. So during the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Yudhishthir had observed the scene towards the end, and he had seen how much chaos had happened. It was literally just dead bodies all over the place. He thought about the same sort of things Arjuna had given in arguments against Krishna. The families will be disjointed because now the mothers will be alone with the children. There'll be so much death, so much chaos. What's going to happen? So Yudhishthir is seeing this, and he's thinking, oh my God, it's all because of me. Because I'm supposed to be put as the emperor of the kingdom. This is my fault. And Krishna, hearing this and seeing this, he called Yudhishthir and he called all the Pandavas. And he said, look, this war is orchestrated by me. There's a purpose for this. It's so you can establish Dharma. And there's a reason that you need to establish Dharma now. Because we're going into this age called Kali Yuga. And the age is going to change and things are going to change. The Pandavas couldn't really quite understand this because they're with Krishna and they're so intimate with Krishna. So you're with Krishna, there's no Kali Yuga with Krishna, there's no influence of Maya with Krishna. And they're devotees of Krishna. So they couldn't understand, what do you mean Kali Yuga is coming? We just see the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we see you within everything. So he said, okay, let's try a little experiment. You 5 Pandavas, you go out in 5 directions, and you keep walking until you see something so strange that you can't explain it. You can't explain it with your logic, with your intelligence, through Shastra, it just doesn't make sense. So they all went out, and the first to come back was Yudhishthira Maharaj. And he says, my dear Lord, I saw something so strange. She said, what did you see? Because I saw an elephant, and it had 2 tusks, which was normal, but it also had 2 trunks. What does this mean? I couldn't explain it. I've never seen an elephant with 2 trunks. And he said, this represents that in Kali Yuga, people will say one thing but do something else. So this deceitful mentality, this two-faced mentality. There's two trunks. And this is very common in Kali Yuga. When you read the symptoms of Kali Yuga, this comes up. Or Srila Prabhupada would talk about Kali Yuga, this comes up. It's honesty and truthfulness it's not always so clear. So then Bhima came next. And Bhima said, "My dear Lord, I saw something so strange." Krishna said, "What did you see?" So, "My dear Lord, I saw there was a very big pond, almost like a big lake, and it was so deep, yet there was just a little bit of water in it. But surrounding this deep lake, there were many shallow, small ponds, which are overflowing, gushing out with water, but yet there was no water in the deep reservoir. I've never seen anything like this. Usually the deeper you dig, the more water comes out." And Krishna said in Kali Yuga, this represents that those who have spiritual depth and actually really have realization, what will be flowing out of them, or what the general population will be interested in, would be very small. You see the water as the general population, and that deep reservoir as a spiritually deep person, people would not be interested in their message. But those who have less substance to share, they will be so enamored by the population. People will be flocking to people who have less substance and are sharing a message that's not really spiritually deep. It's quite an amazing statement, right? Because you can kind of understand and see what Krishna is predicting in everyday life. And he goes, unfortunate people will give their money, will give their time to those who aren't really giving the real message. And because their intention is fame, money, not so much compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. So then that was the second. There's still 3 more to go. And Arjuna came next. And he said, I saw a beautiful bird. I saw a bird that was covered with shlokas, Sanskrit shlokas all over his body. This is not strange, it's so beautiful. Maybe he came from the heavenly planets. Arjuna said, no, but something really strange happened. And this bird, all these beautiful shlokas, it came down and it started eating the flesh of a dead body, like a vulture. Because how could such a beautiful verse adorned with so many nice verses be there not eating the flesh of a dead body? And this is actually something that Srila Prabhupada had warned so much about. And if you would hear him ever talk about the professional Bhagavatam speaker, or those who use the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most sacred scripture, for the means of name and fame, this is what he's referring to. In Kali Yuga, people will garb themselves as sadhus to exploit their followers. And this is the bird who is garbed as with verses, is taking advantage of the dead body, pecking at it. So then this is Arjuna, perplexed. And now there's 2 more Pandavas left, the often forgotten Pandavas, Nakula and Sahadev. So then Nakula comes back, and he said, I saw a mother cow with a baby calf drinking milk. This is a very common and beautiful sight. But the mother was licking the body of the cow affectionately, also very beautiful. But she kept licking, and it was very harsh, and it hurt and bruised the body of the calf. The calf would start to bleed. And he said, this is so sad and so strange to see. What does this mean? And Krishna said that this means the parents, the guardians, the elders, they will show affection, but the affection may be misdirected in the wrong way. They would want to give money and all materialistic things to the child, but actually it's hurting their spiritual growth. It's not actually nourishing them. They want to be interested in taking the children and the younger generations and teaching them spiritual subject matters, taking them to temples, having them meet spiritually elevated people, but rather just increase material attachment. And this is bruising and causing wounds to one's spiritual life, causing wounds to their soul, and where their actual progress is heading is being misdirected. And so Sahadev came last. And this is where it gets really interesting. He said, I saw a big boulder coming down. It was picking up speed. And the more it came down, everything in its way started becoming destroyed. The trees, the houses, the big houses, nothing could stop this boulder. And as it picked so much speed and came towards me, there was a small little plant coming out of the ground. And as soon as this boulder touched the plant, it immediately stopped. It just came to a halt. What is this? I've never seen anything like this. It's defied all gravity, all laws of nature. And what is this plant? And Krishna said, this is the one good quality of this age of Kali, is that this boulder, this tumbling of material life, which is heading in a fast direction, is picking up speed. Everything in its way represents jnana yoga, karma yoga. But these processes can't stop the influence of Kali. It's picking up speed more and more and more. But the small little twiggly plant that's coming out of the ground, this represents chanting the holy name of Krishna. This represents chanting my holy name. And it's small because it's so simple, and it's often overlooked, but it's so powerful. It's so powerful that the age of Kali can stop at a single moment. The influence of Maya can stop at a single moment by sincerely chanting the holy name. This is the real purport of the age of Kali. And this is the real purport of that the brothers understood. They observed the age of Kali had begun. So they saw all these things. They understood all the symptoms. They heard it from Krishna. They saw it in their citizens. But they remember the real purport of the age of Kali is this chanting of the holy name. There's an article my spiritual master wrote once, and it's called All Glories to the Age of Coral. And I thought it was so interesting. And he said that people in previous ages would never be able to believe you. If you went to Satya Yuga and teleported or went back in time, and you're like, hey, I just have to chant this, of course, without offense and with attachment and affection to Krishna, but I just chant this one mantra, and you meditating without eating for thousands of years, I can do this. They wouldn't believe you. They would say, there's no way that you're attaining the same result we're attaining. But that's the power of the age of Kali. And actually, the environment that we're in, if you look at it from an opportunistic point of view, you come to this conclusion. And because you start thinking there's got to be something more than what's going on outside. There's got to be something more than life as I see it. You don't see things getting better long term. You see temporary happiness, but a lot more long-term distress. It's not like an even, pendulum. And this is the opportunity that they took here. There's a really wonderful verse in the end of Srimad Bhagavatam that speaks about Kali Yuga and chanting the holy name. Kaler dosha nidhe rajan, asti hekyo mahan guna, kirtanad eva krishnasya, mukta sangha param brijat. And it's a really, really beautiful verse. It's often considered the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, because after speaking all of Srimad Bhagavatam, after sharing all of this with Parikshit Maharaj, he starts off with the story of his parents and grandparents and his ancestors, the Pandavas, and their story. And he's sharing all of this information, and he goes to the history of the world, and Krishna's pastimes, and he ends up here at this verse, and says, this age of Kali, Kaler dosha nidhe rajan, an ocean of bad qualities. There's so many bad qualities, but asti hyeko mahan guna. You recognize this word guna, like the three gunas, or three modes or qualities of material nature. So mahan guna means mahaguna. It's one great quality in this age. One great quality, and that's kirtanad eva krishnasya, with the constant chanting of a name of Krishna, of the kirtan of Krishna, actually, this congregational chanting, kirtan of Krishna, glorification of Krishna. This is the single good quality in this age of Kali. And mukta sangha param brijat, the mukta sangha, you immediately attain liberation, but more importantly, param brijat, you go to the highest transcendental platform. Param Vraj. You go back, it'll take you directly back home, back to Godhead. And if you go to, maybe Nate, you can go to the next, I think it's verse 48, 49, you get a little bit of a clue of how to perform this devotional service. So this is the devotional service that's given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for this age. The same indication of Kali Yuga that Krishna gave. He came down to teach what to do. And the Pandavas here gave a little bit of a hint of how to do it. And it's really, just go to scroll a little bit to the top. I just want to read it. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayan Lord Krishna. So constant devotional remembrance, this is one key in our chanting and devotional service. This is attained by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. Another key, without deviation. This abode of the Lord, Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contaminations, attained the abode in their very same bodies. So because their consciousness was solely focused on Krishna, they completely was not thinking about anything else. It was just Krishna and Krishna only, just remembering Krishna. That their absorption was so much in Krishna that there was nothing with the material world was going on in their mind. Because of this reason, in the same body, they were able to go back to Goloka Vrindavan. So this is what Mahaprabhu taught us when it came to chanting the holy name. Yeah, we have this chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is shown us a small twig that stops this boulder of Kali Yuga coming. But what makes that twig so strong is not the name itself is pure, but the chanter may not be. So how do we chant in such a way that we can access the potency of the pure name? And this is a key to it. The pure absorption, the full absorption of the sound vibration without deviation and remembrance of Krishna. With these points, then really you can attain the same goal that the Pandavas did. And what's really interesting also about the Pandavas is that the Pandavas had this huge responsibility when it comes to just talk about switching off from material life for a second and switching into just a pure, focused consciousness of Krishna. And often the argument that comes up is, I'm so busy, my mind is in a million different places. How am I supposed to just switch off and focus on my japa? How am I supposed to switch off and focus on Krishna? And our responsibilities are much, much less than their responsibilities. I mean, they were in charge of the whole kingdom. They had so much was going on for them. Yet they had this ability because their work was also their service to Krishna. They never separated the two. The Pandavas never separated that my duty, my being a king, is different than my devotional service. But because they always had this consciousness, actually, they always were in consciousness of Krishna. They always did everything for him throughout their whole life. That when it came time to say, hey, maybe we need to give this up, and it's time for us to focus on the sole goal of life, they were ready because there was no change. Srila Prabhupada mentions in one part of the purport that people don't know what to do in retired life. Ever notice that? They don't know what to do in retired life, not even spiritually speaking, like what to do materially speaking, but do I find a new hobby at the age of 75? Do I try playing golf? Like, what do I do? I don't even know. Because there's what's the direction that a material life can give you that even in retired life, you don't know what to do. Do I keep working and making money? There's so many ways someone who's retired can be taken advantage of because there's no direction. Speaking materially, what to speak of spiritually, right? Maybe they have some spiritual value system, but how do you intensify that? However, the Pandavas really show it this example here. It's that throughout life, the training starts now. It's not, retirement doesn't mean end of life, because one reason end of life can happen at any point. But second reason, if you really see an older person, it's so hard to convince them of something new. It's so hard, especially something spiritual. It's so difficult to have them change their ways because habit is so, so strong. But if we're young now and we develop habits of whatever my duty might be, whether here in the ashram, whether not living in the ashram, whether working a job I like or don't like, if I can take these duties and relate it, give the fruits of the offering and the actual action to the Supreme Lord and say, this is for you, and I know the end goal in mind, and I want to always keep consciousness of you with whatever I do, then when you come to this point of life, this stage of life, whether the stage of life for some people may be very, romantic, and I have so much time at the end of my life, I can move to Vrindavan, and everything works out so beautifully, or sometimes this stage of life happens in an instant, a car crash. But this stage of life, the end of one's life, remembering Krishna, chanting the holy name purely, that comes with practice. And it doesn't mean we give up everything that we do now to practice it. It means we utilize our service and our actions now in order to come to this platform. And I wanted to end, before we take questions and some discussion, with a little bit of how the Pandavas were able to understand that this was the time to make this major change in this life. Because it's a really big change for the emperor of the kingdom to make a decision that now it's time for me to leave. When we have so much responsibility, it's how do I put that aside? How do I properly move past that and take advantage of the new opportunity? And I think it's really important for our life. How can we see when it's time to make a major change? And it wasn't a rushed decision. There was a lot of steps that went into this. So the first thing is complete your duty. And that's what they did, because easily Yudhishthira Maharaj could have said, this is it. And look at the war, everyone's dead, it's my fault, I'm gonna leave right now. But that wasn't his duty. He had a bigger purpose, which really that was Krishna's purpose. This is what he wanted them to do. So he stuck around and did it. So they had to complete their duty. And it wasn't until they installed Maharaj Parikshit as the emperor that they felt now is the time where I've done what I needed to do. So really important, when we move into a new situation of life, not to leave a mess behind us. And then they had real knowledge. They understood what the real problems of life were, what the temporary problems of life were. They had actual realized knowledge, which is shown here. They understood what the symptoms of the age of Kali was, what's around them, what the actual goal of life is. And then they see the environment and try to find the right time. And for them, it was seeing things get worse in the world to a point where they would not have control over it. Seeing something in your own situation to a point where maybe I don't have control over this anymore. I can't directly influence this. Maybe it's time for me to move on. So they assessed it in this way. And perhaps the most important was following in the footsteps of Acharyas. And they follow in the footsteps of Yudhishthira Maharaj. And if you go back to verse 44, you'll see that Yudhishthira Maharaj left following his forefathers' footsteps. He moved on and retired in such a way because he saw the way that the others had done it before him. And this is usually how it goes, is that if I want to move on make a major life decision from one area of life that I'm in now to the next, it's really important to do so in such a way that people who have had success have done it before, and you follow in their footsteps. And that's what parampara is. And it's not just in terms of I took initiation from this person, took initiation from this person, but parampara applies to many aspects of life, including our life decisions. How have those who have become spiritually realized, how is my seniors and their seniors and their seniors, my spiritual master and his spiritual master, his spiritual master, how have they made decisions? Because maybe they've done it well, and perhaps if I also want to do it well, I should see how they've done it. And so every proper life transition isn't done whimsically. There's a lot of thought that goes on behind it. And I'll end with this really wonderful quote from Srila Prabhupada. This is on a lecture on this exact verse, or the one that we talked about today. He says, so in this way, there are so many symptoms. It will take a long time to describe. This is Kali Yuga. But there is a remedy. There is a remedy. Kalir dosha niderajan. The faults of this age just like ocean. Just like in the ocean, you cannot, Pacific Ocean. If you are put in the Pacific Ocean, you do not know how your life will be saved. It is very difficult. Even if you are a very expert swimmer, so it is not possible that you can cross the Pacific Ocean. That is not possible. Similarly, the Kali Yuga, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that infected with so many anomalies, there is no way out. But there is one medicine only. Kirtanad eva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajit. That is also described, that if you chant the Hare Krishna mantra, Kirtanad eva krishnasya, especially the name of Krishnasya, mukta sangha, you will be relieved from this infection of Kali Yuga. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That was from Los Angeles. That's probably why he was talking about the Pacific Ocean. Anyways, I want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, realizations. About 10 minutes.
Amazing points. My question is, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit for everyone how retirement works, like for someone who's practicing devotional service. I really appreciated the point of how you explained that they always saw their service, what they were doing, as their service to Krishna, right? So it was always connected, because that point is really important. Sometimes feel like, we do our sadhana, we do the morning program, and then maybe during the day we don't feel we feel disconnected or something like that. Where people see maybe their job is disconnected. So I really liked how you talk about how when you see it connected, when you see it as your service to Krishna, it's not an impediment. So in retirement, on one hand, we hear, at a certain point of age, retire from duties and go and completely focus on the spiritual life. And then we also saw Prabhupada's example of Prabhupada was like, I'm going to die on the battlefield. And he was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam up until his last breath. Someone like Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who recently left the world, was serving according to his last breath. And we see with many pure devotees that they do this. So I was wondering if you could speak on that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think there's two questions there. One is just the topic of retirement life and Krishna consciousness, and the other is taking an active role in retirement, or quote unquote passive role. I say quote unquote because it perhaps may not be as passive as you think. But when I think about retirement and Krishna consciousness, the most prominent example comes from my parents. So they're both retired now. That was a longish process for them to do. I was part of the reason because my dad's like, here, take this business. I'm like, I don't want it. He's like, take it. I'm like, I don't want it. He's like, I want to retire, take it. So I'm running his business now, and that was a big part of allowing him to retire. And his goal for retirement, he was very active his whole life in both his work, meaning his way to make money, his business, as well as his services. A lot of service for the Temple of Veda Planetarium, a lot of service in Braj, in different projects. Yeah, and he is also still continuing that in one way, but he felt after a lot of exhausting service in his life that he wasn't able to put as much emphasis in his sadhana as he would have liked to. And now he wants to live in Vrindavan and focus on hearing and chanting, which is what he's doing. And I was with him last April or something, and I remember he stays in the MVT in Vrindavan, and Shivaram Swami was visiting, and Maharaj was staying in one of the rooms in the guest house. And they used to know each other quite well and done some service in Nivrashtam in Hungary before. And my wife's Maharaj's disciple, and when we went up, he was saying, oh, how's your father? And I was like, oh, he lives here, just across the MVT. No way, I haven't seen him in ages. Tell him to come and see me. And my dad was a little nervous because they've kind of went their own ways a little bit, and they haven't seen each other in years. So I never see my dad nervous. He's this very kind of tough looking guy, and he doesn't he's really a softie, but he doesn't have that. He doesn't portray nervousness or squirmishness or anything. And I was like, what's going on with him? So we went up to Maharaj's room and they gave each other a hug. And Maharaj is just like, oh, so how's it going? What are you up to? He goes, I'm just in Vrindavan, just trying to focus on my bhajan. And he goes, my whole life I felt like I've ignored this side of me. And now is the time I want to focus on it. And Maharaj said something that really, really caught my attention. He said, but all the seva you've done your whole life and all the work you've done your whole life has built the adhikar for you to be able to do what you're doing now. That means it's built the qualification. All the seva you've done, all the sacrifice you've made over those years, instilling, I know he meant also never forgetting the goal in mind. It's not like he did these things just for the sake of doing it or feeling good about himself. I've done so much service or I've made this much money, but knowing that he wants to just absorb himself in Krishna. Because of doing that, Krishna has awarded him the opportunity to live and stay in Vrindavan and practice Krishna consciousness. And similarly, my mother once told me, because her health always wasn't that great and she raised 4 kids, and she'd always say, oh, I just want to go to the morning program every day, but I can't. I'm so tired and it's so difficult for me to go. And one time I was like, just go. Like, you just all the time saying, I want to go, just go. And then she said, you know what? For so many years, even though I say this and I want this kind of lifestyle, and I can't do it, I never gave up that desire that I want to have a life where now I can attend the morning program every day and be more free of responsibilities. She goes, I never gave up that desire. And because I never gave up the desire, now she has that opportunity. She can do it. And I can imagine if she had given up a desire along the way, this stage in her life would have came and she wouldn't have felt like any impetus to go to the morning program. Maybe she would have found something else to do in her retirement age. So what we do in our life actually builds these pious credits, and it builds some sukriti for us to do these things in retirement. The next thing I want to say to your point of Srila Prabhupada's example of old age versus someone else's example. Mahaprabhu tells Sanatana Goswami that in relation to the holy name, there's achar and prachar. There is your own personal example and then what you say to others. And these shouldn't be different. They're both very important. And in that regard, you can see Srila Prabhupada's example is prachar, but it's not without the achar. It's the preaching, but not without the substance behind it, the personal example. On the other hand, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has said that by the intensity and purity of the chanting of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, that he single-handedly put a halt on the progression of Kali Yuga. So different, right? One sat in one place and chanted Harinam, and one preached all over the world. But both are Paramahamsas, both are Gaudiya Acharyas, and both benefited us actually. But one is much more visible by the compassion of Srila Prabhupada. We can sit here in Gainesville and practice Krishna consciousness. But by the compassion of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, maybe not as directly visible what potency that had, but then you have this very powerful, strong Gaudiya lineage coming after him. So it's a little bit inconceivable in that way, but the essence still remains the same. Anybody else? Time?
Thank you, Prabhu. I've never heard that story before of the 5 symptoms of
I heard it from my dad.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, a lot of great points. And I was just thinking about retirement and how often in Krishna consciousness we can't just like detach. It's actually like having proper attachment. And I think about my parents. My dad told me on spring break that he's like in a position to retire, but he doesn't want to. He like wants to work. And, he's like, what else am I gonna do? And my mom says the same thing. She's like, I sometimes tell her that she works too hard. She works like every weekend and stuff, but she's like, yeah, what else am I gonna do? And then I also look at these like iPad kids at like restaurants. And I can't help but think like, yeah, the world doesn't necessarily know what proper engagement is. Yeah, like that's the problem.
Yeah, it's a very big problem. Thank you for sharing that. Like, what's the culture? What's the culture that we grow up in? What's the result of the culture? Perhaps the baby boomer generation, there was a culture of strong work ethic, or older generations, you know, and that when I also like I sell clothing to boutiques, and boutique owners are often old. We had one lady who, one of our regular customers, passed away recently. She was like 84. She just worked her last breath practically. You know, this is what they do, and it gives them a renewed sense of purpose, and which is respectable in one way. And then also, yeah, and then you have the iPad generation, as you know, is what that sense of culture of quick sense gratification, where that would lead to. So, but that's why one of the purposes of Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON mission and our society is spreading this spiritual culture. And the spiritual culture is based off really deep values. The spiritual culture is based off something which has a goal in mind, whereas other cultures may have a temporary solution or a way to engage the younger generation and use technology to connect one another, you know, or work hard to build prosperity. But there's never really a goal in mind. What do you do when it's done? And you can't answer that in modern culture very easily. You know, you may have some people say, okay, it's done, it's done. You just live it out and live a good life, and that's it. But someone with a little bit of intelligence thinks, what happens after life? What is the goal of life? And then from the goal backwards, you work. And that's where spiritual culture comes in. So that's one of the amazing, beautiful things we have, is that we can tap into that culture and try to live based off those values, because the values that we may be taught in this world won't take us to a goal. Yeah.
It's also like people were saying, this retirement, I was really inspired by what your dad has done. Thinking of him, he's spending all his time in Vrindavan and setting such a nice example, and how retirement could look differently for different devotees.
Yeah.
For someone, it's the personal desire, what they cultivate. It's not one like cookie fits everything. Everyone should retire like this. I was also thinking about like my dad and contrasting that with like father of one of my friends, who usually you retire at 60 when you're doing like working for the government, and then you have option of working 5 extra years, but you get like paid half. Some people just do that because like what else am I gonna do? So this friend's dad, that's what he did. And after that, he was like, what am I gonna do? So he went to school, he's starting to learn law so he can practice law and become like a lawyer. Because again, like what am I gonna do at home? He's working so hard at this stage of life. But my dad, like when he was 60, like he was like, I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Just retired. But the funniest thing is, he was staying away from the temple for so many years, like trying to work and support us. Now all that he does is like temple service. Like he was helping them build a local temple because he was an engineer. And he's basically doing his work, but everything for the temple. And so from outsider's point of view, he's more busy than he was when he was working before. But now he has a sense of like purpose. Yes, more happy than he was before.
Yeah, it looks different for everybody. Also because when you're Krishna conscious throughout our life and you come to the point of retirement, Krishna within the heart inspires your next step. You know, there's a relationship there. And therefore it looks different for everybody, because when you're following desire of the Supreme Lord and desire of the spiritual master, then you just follow that way and everything becomes revealed. Jai. Kantarashima Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Karya Vidya Jodindriya Kareka Jile Shasare Narvati Bharati Lokamasu Take Tira Saksare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
I've been to this actually, even last time I saw the movie Street, even last time my husband and I were out. Yeah.
I'll show you this funny video. He's got this new concoction that basically he's like
All the other stuff. Oh, really cool. It's never like the most stressful thing I've ever. You can like
Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm like so hungry. Oh no.